The Wabash, from New Corydon in northeast Indiana to New Harmony in the southwest corner of the state, the Wabash is Indiana's river. Born of events of the last ice age, its waters delivered us from the wilderness and connected us with the rest of the world. Travel along its banks, get to know its people, and understand the influence the Wabash has had on us as individuals, on us as a state, and on us all as a nation.
This river is such an important part of our history. It's who we are, and it's an important part of the future.
Then look to its waters for evidence of what we have done, the choices we've made, how well we have walked the delicate balance between meeting our needs and the needs of the river.
The Wabash's health is directly reflecting the health of the land and the way we're taking care of it.
It's our shoreline, it's a lake shore, it's our mountains, it's our resort area.
The Wabash River is a global jewel of biodiversity.
It's that squiggly line on the left side of the map.
Join us now as we explore the life of the river and the lives of the people who call it home in the Wabash, life on the bright, white river.
The Wabash, life on the bright white river, is produced in cooperation with the Wabash River Heritage Corridor Commission and made possible with the support of the Wabash Valley Association for orderly development in a balanced environment. Additional program funding provided by
the Nature Conservancy, who, with its members and conservation partners, has protected over 56,000 acres of irreplaceable forest, wetland, and prairie habitats throughout Indiana. Visit us on the web at nature.org.
Hoosier Energy, a generation and transmission cooperative based in Bloomington, providing electric power and services to central and southern Indiana distribution cooperatives.
The Hoosier Environmental Council's Wabash Riverkeeper, protecting Indiana's rivers for you. To help, call 317-685-8800.
The Rivers Institute at Hanover College, enhancing the understanding of the culture, economics, and science of river systems throughout the world. More at riversinstitute.org.
On an October morning, with temperatures in the mid-50s and the leaves not yet fallen from the trees, a small armada of inflatable rafts pushes off from the banks of the Wabash. The rafts are occupied by Sullivan County 8th graders. Each raft is also equipped with a grown-up, there to inspire the 8th graders toward a deeper appreciation of this river that makes up the western boundary of their county and their state.
First, guys, you know that the river belongs to the people of Indiana. It's our river. And I use a possessive pronoun because it is. It belongs to us. And so then we look after our own property. We look after our own stuff. Plus, in the world that we live in, kids, good water is becoming harder and harder to find. And in the past, we haven't recognized that. Now what we hope is that your generation will understand the importance of good water and the importance of looking after water systems. And that's one of the reasons why you're here with us now, because we want you to become river advocates.
More so than most, the Wabash is a free-flowing river. Downstream of the dam at Huntington, there are no more dams on the Wabash, and for almost 400 miles, it flows without impediment.
The Wabash is the longest, largest undammed river east of the Mississippi.
When you look at what's unique about North American rivers and what they look like originally, the Wabash retains a lot of those species and communities that were originally there.
When you dam a river, why you create a deeper, slow-moving, if moving at all, body of water, and the whole fauna changes.
Because of its more natural state, the Wabash supports a diversity of life not possible on heavily dammed rivers like the Ohio and the Mississippi.
It's a big river that's never been impounded. It hasn't lost those mussel species, the crayfish, the ancient paddlefish, and all the gars that need open waters and move up and down the rivers without the dams impeding them.
Undammed and flowing freely, the Wabash offers the rare opportunity to take a look backward in biological time.
It's not to say that the Wabash we see today is the Wabash the settlers saw when they first got here, but it's as close to the original as you're going to get here in the Midwest.
The Wabash River has been the inspiration for a lot of music. Let's go to the internet, to allmusic.com, and see what songs we find. I will look for the song and Wabash River. Look at all the responses. Here's one called Wabash Blues by Banjomania. Here's Walk Along the Wabash, where the dreamy Wabash flows. The Wabash Stomp and the Wabash Charleston, and of course on the banks of the Wabash.
Through the sycamores the candle lights are gleaming on the banks of the Wabash, far away.
It was bright white limestone shining up through crystal clear water that inspired Native Americans to name their sacred river Waa-paah-siki, or the Bright White. French fur traders shortened the name of this bright white river from Waa-paah-siki to Wabash, and the early settlers changed it again to Wabash, the name we know today. The river has changed, and its waters, once crystal clear, have gone cloudy with time, but as long as we remember the story of its name, we carry a reminder of just how breathtaking the Wabash must have been to those first astonished human eyes. Why does the Wabash go where it goes? What determines the route it takes? Geologists Jack Sunderman and Tony Fleming have found answers to those questions 25 miles away from the Wabash along U.S. Highway 30 on the far east side of Fort Wayne.
I'd like for you to imagine that we were standing here some 10,000 years ago. In this direction, to the north and to the east, instead of the flat lake plain we're seeing, we would see water. A lake extended all the way from what is now Lake Erie up to this area. So we're looking out, if we were here 10,000 years ago, at lake water, some 20 or 30 feet deep at this point, deeper as we go farther east.
Before the water in this lake was a lake, the water stood frozen, a towering glacier.
It's amazing to think that at the end of glaciation, this place here may have been covered by as much as a half-mile thick of ice. And of course, when you melt that much ice, you're going to produce an awful lot of glacial meltwater.
This glacial meltwater became Glacial Lake Maumee, a lake perhaps as big as present-day Lake Erie. And the waters of Glacial Lake Maumee may have still been a feature on our maps today, had not the western wall of the lake, a massive 100-foot-high ridge, also known as the Fort Wayne Moraine, begun to weaken and to crumble and fall.
Can you imagine the force of that water when the moraine gave way? And billions of gallons a day of frigid glacial meltwater spilled through this sluiceway in a matter of days to sculpt what we now know as the modern Wabash Valley. And the effects of that flood, which is known to geology as the Maumee Torrent, are visible all the way down the Wabash River.
Cheryl Munson of Indiana University has invited the 4th grade class from Mars Elementary School in Mount Vernon, Indiana, to join her and her team of archaeologists for a day of digging into the past.
Welcome to the Hovey Lake Archaeological Site. And the first thing to tell you is that you are standing on the place where there was a prehistoric Indian village that is 600 to 350 years old.
The prehistoric village at the Hovey Lake site is one of 4 such sites around the mouth of the Wabash.
Well, I think the confluence of the Wabash and Ohio rivers was like the confluence of Interstate 64 and Interstate 65. Just think about it. If you're in a canoe at the mouth of the Wabash, you can go upstream to the Great Lakes area and by small streams portage over towards Fort Wayne and go further to the northeast. You could also go down the Ohio to the Mississippi and then up or down the Mississippi, or you could go all the way up the Ohio to the Alleghenies.
5 years ago, Cheryl and her colleagues were excavating at another Wabash River site, this one known as Bone Bank.
And you couldn't get much closer to the Wabash River than we were because your feet could literally be in the Wabash River if you were standing there at the edge of the site.
Things looked much different to the original prehistoric inhabitants of Bone Bank. 500 years ago, when their village was here, the Wabash wasn't.
But when the people lived at the Bone Bank site, the river was a half-mile away.
But a river's natural tendency to eat away at its own shoreline can cause the river's channel to shift. In this case, the shoreline was eaten away, and the channel of the Wabash shifted to the east toward Bone Bank, and the river didn't lose its appetite once it got to Bone Bank.
We knew after 2 years of survey that the river was cutting away about 1 meter of soil every year. And we knew that it had been doing this for centuries. We knew we didn't have much time left, so we really did work fast.
Working to stay ahead of the river, Cheryl and her colleagues dug and sifted and cataloged, collecting as much information as possible before what was left of the prehistoric village totally disappeared. 5 years after the Bone Bank excavation, the Wabash has taken its toll. Almost none of the original site remains, and visitors are advised to come by boat.
Right here was our big excavation block. Back under these tree roots and over to the area which has been scoured away is the last remnant of the Bone Bank site.
Well, there's Sweet Genevieve on the banks of the Wabash. Wabash Avenue. Hell on the Wabash. Here's the Wabash. It's got 22 occurrences. Wabash Blues, 145. Look at this. Wabash Cannonball, 309 occurrences.
They want to know what your name is.
Huh?
They want to know what your name is.
Win. C-O-U-C, Couch.
History along the Wabash comes in all shapes and sizes. This is Wayne Couch.
How old are you?
I'm 95 past. May 31st, 1910.
What did you do as a young man on the river? You fished and muscled too, didn't you?
No, I never did fish commercially. Never did mussel, but I've been down here off and on ever since I was 12 years old. Well, folks come down here quite a bit, had kin folks down here. And one of the first things, we always had fish when they come. Tell them, come on, start. Come on.
At the cabin Wayne built on the banks of the Wabash more than 60 years ago, he carries on this rich tradition of Wabash River hospitality by feeding the multitudes, as often as possible, with fish from the river.
Or do you want one of these? Do you want one of these? No, that's a rib.
I've been there.
Here's another one.
How's that for bluegill?
There you go.
You guys have to hurry up. There won't be no fish left.
People on the Wabash take their fishing seriously. They get help from the Indiana Department of Natural Resources Electrofishing Research Program.
The electrofishing means of collecting fish. It's very effective. Compared to nets, it captures a much larger diversity of fish than a net or a seine, for that matter.
An electric current is passed through the water, shocking fish and bringing them to the surface to be taken into temporary custody.
It also enables you to take certain measurements like weight and length and condition, and it enables you then to use those things to evaluate the status of the fish community.
These evaluations, combined with studies of river pollutants like mercury, PCBs, pesticides, and E. coli, can shed light on the stresses we place upon our river fish and on how the fish are responding. And although the pollution is harmful to the fish, the electrofishing is not.
Don't worry, the electrofishing doesn't hurt the fish at all. It just temporarily stuns them and brings them to the surface so we can net them and handle them and then put them back.
How are you guys doing today? I'm with the Indiana Department of Natural Resources, and we're doing a survey on the Wabash River this summer. You guys mind if I ask you a couple questions?
Meanwhile, on another part of the Wabash, the DNR is conducting a creel survey.
We're just trying to see what people are using the river for and if they're fishing, what they're catching, that kind of stuff. Do you mind if I take a look at your catfish?
No, go ahead.
Have you guys caught any fish that you released?
Yeah, we caught a couple perch. Caught a perch this morning too. We turned those.
We've been tagging catfish and sturgeon too. Indiana's getting a little reward for return tags, just something to be on the lookout for. So, well, we appreciate you taking the time. Hope you guys catch some more.
Bye.
Come here, kitty, kitty, kitty.
Sports fishermen are not the only ones pulling fish out of the Wabash. John Farmer of Grayville, Illinois, is one of the last, if not the last, full-time commercial fishermen on the Wabash.
Oh, I've been doing it probably 28 years, maybe. I got 31 nets out, so doing pretty good, really, considering.
John Farmer is a man of few words, and a healthy proportion of those few words are directed toward his fish.
Yeah, buddy, you'll be fertilizer Friday. Hello, Mr. Carpy. You're definitely going to get 8. That's your carp.
He spends his mornings tending his nets and trot lines.
That's your grass carp.
Afternoons are spent cleaning his catch. And at Thursday noon and Friday evening, John opens up the fish house, a concrete block screened-in porch of a restaurant, and people come from miles around to partake of the Wabash's freshest catch.
Oh, it takes a little bit of everything.
And we've been coming over here for about 3, 4, 5 years, and it's very good.
These buffalo ribs are really good. If you've never eaten buffalo, it's white, it's very good. But it comes off of a large buffalo. It has to be a pretty good size. They're really bony in the small ones, and they're in the carp family, but they're very good. We come over all the time. We enjoy it. We'll be back.
This is a tune called Wabash.
I would like to tell you about my pearl ring. It is a ring that my husband Wayne gave me, and it comes from a mussel shell out of the Wabash River, and I'm very proud of it.
It was fashion that once fed the flame of inspiration, causing men to set out from the Wabash shore in search of sunken treasure, the coveted Wabash freshwater pearl.
Now here in this case here is our natural Wabash River pearls. Now we have many of them and many selections.
In the early days of the 20th century, people could go from rags to riches, finding and selling these pearls from the Wabash.
Well, at that time, pearls were much more dignified than diamonds. Diamonds were considered somewhat vulgar, and everybody wanted pearls, freshwater pearls. I think in the year 1905, they bought something like $320,000 worth of pearls from Vincennes. It is rumored that some of these pearls even made it into the crown jewels of England.
But some pearls stayed a little closer to home.
What we have here are freshwater pearls from the Vincennes area that were acquired by a tavern owner during the Depression era. They were traded by thirsty people during the Depression era for drinks.
Freshwater pearls from the Wabash in all shapes and sizes were plucked from the meat of mussels, brought up in their shells from the bottom of the river.
Could I have a napkin and I'll show you how they did that? They would take what the people around here would have called a john boat, which is a wooden boat with square ends, and they would outfit that boat, let this rectangle be the boat, and they would fix a pipe, usually about 10 feet long, and that pipe would have strong string coming off of it about every 3 inches, and on the end of that there would be sort of a hook, and the hook was called a brail. That 10-foot long pipe with about 150 of these devices along it, this then would be dragged along the bottom, and whenever they touched a mussel, the mussel would close its shell against it and latch onto the side of this, and that would pull it out of the sand in the bottom of the river. I once was helping my father. This bar was pretty heavy, and I wasn't as strong as my father, and I was pulling that up, and he looked at me and says, "I just don't see why that's as difficult for you as it is." And anyway, it was very heavy.
Only the occasional mussel would yield a pearl, but the mussel shell itself could also be valuable. In the days before plastics, its inside surface, hard and pearlescent, was prized in the making of pearl buttons.
And what they would do is they would use a machine that looks much like a drill, or a big generator type of drill, and this would be on the end of it. And this drill bit would then be inserted into and shoot these blanks out into a little bucket. And these little blanks were then sent off to another place where they would be polished, and then smaller holes drilled in to make buttons.
Pretty every town along the river had a little plant that cut button blanks, pearl buttons. And when pearl buttons, plastic come in, that put the pearl buttons out of business.
The world found one more use for these shells from the Wabash River.
In the 1960s and 70s, those shells were sent to Japan, and they were cut into little spheres that were used to seed pearl oysters.
Pollution and overfishing brought an end to commercial mussling on the Wabash in the early 1990s.
They pretty much fished off most of the mussels along the Wabash River, so about in the early 1990s they outlawed fishing for mussels on the Wabash River. And a lot of those species of mussels that were knocked out are endangered to this day and haven't come back, and maybe never will come back.
If you take a look up and down the Wabash River today, you don't see much boat activity. But in the past, the paddle wheels moved up and down this river, bringing freight and produce from different areas. There were also recreational paddle wheels, which everyone loved, dancing and parties, outings that people would take up and down the river. Then the railroads began to infringe upon that river traffic, and the packet boats and entertainment boats began to dwindle. So unfortunately, those grand days, almost romantic days of the paddle wheels moving up and down the river diminished and finally faded away.
When this railroad bridge went up across the Wabash in 1904, river boats had not yet completely gone away. Since the boats were too tall to pass under the bridge, other arrangements had to be made.
The bridge sets on a center pier that allows the bridge to actually rotate.
Swinging lengthwise, the bridge provided riverboats clear passage on the Wabash.
The bridge itself has gears and mechanisms. It's very precise how it's weighted to where actually one man with a crank can swivel the bridge. You could just imagine an actual riverboat plying the Wabash and that bridge turning, and then the attendant turns it back, and then subsequently a train goes over. Great.
When the bridge was abandoned by the New York Central Railroad in 1968, it found new life as a way for automotive traffic to move across the Wabash, from St. Francisville in Illinois to Indiana, just south of Vincennes.
Crossing the St. Francisville Bridge is quite the experience. It is a wooden deck and plank platform, and it's very narrow.
Motor traffic runs both ways across the river on the St. Francisville Bridge, but only one way at a time.
It takes a little bit of skill to cross it, but it's very safe. I highly recommend anyone that's in the area to pay the 50 cents and go over the bridge. It's an experience that you will not forget. It's wonderful.
Ever since white settlement first took hold and began to grow in the Northwest Territory, visionary champions of navigability have been dreaming up ways to use the Wabash to move merchandise and people. In the middle of the 19th century, these dreams produced the Wabash and Erie Canal, a 468-mile-long man-made waterway fed by the Wabash, but not affected by the river's twists and turns or the rise and fall of its waters. Today, outside Delphi, a mile-long stretch of the canal has been restored. Dan McCain serves proudly as its guardian.
This canal now is something of treasure because it's the only significant section of the Wabash and Erie Canal in Indiana where you can actually walk right along a watered portion.
The canal made it possible to ride on tranquil waters, first west and then south to the Ohio River, then on to the Mississippi and down to New Orleans.
In the meantime, they were moving to the east as well into Ohio. So by 1843, you could get on a boat right here in Delphi and go all the way to New York Harbor.
State-of-the-art transportation in 1843. But developments in technology brought an early end to the Wabash and Erie Canal.
Certainly when the railroads did come, they began to erode the economy of the faltering canal so that finally Indiana became bankrupt as a result of spending too much money on their internal improvements, and that was the end of the canal.
I don't know, we still have the dream. I think we'll all always have the dream of the navigation, and that it's an important thing and the best thing that could happen in our area.
And running all the way from the Ohio to the Great Lakes. That's always been my dream and vision.
In 1957, 81 years after the last commercial traffic disappeared on the Wabash and Erie Canal, a new group of champions of Wabash navigability emerged. From its headquarters in Mount Carmel, Illinois, the Wabash Valley Association embarked upon its mission to mobilize the citizens of eastern Illinois and western Indiana to persuade their government representatives to authorize the funds necessary to make the Wabash River a commercially navigable body of water.
When the Wabash Valley Association believed that the Wabash River was our largest asset to our whole region that we really weren't using and couldn't use very well, but with navigation, then would come the side benefits of the recreation, the cleaner water, the development along the river, and all those things that would be good to our areas that really need a boost in the arm and a little extra help.
We have up to maybe nearly 2,000 members at one time. Right. I mean, I think paying members.
Right, they made it easy to be a member because it was just $10 and then later $15 a year to be a member. And so then after you were a member, you received literature and you were actually asked to make these trips to Washington and to make these trips and in addition.
At their own cost.
At their own cost.
Their own expenses.
The purpose of these self-financed trips to Washington was for the membership to meet with members of Congress. The Wabash Valley Association believes the damming, dredging, and redirection necessary to make the Wabash commercially navigable would be worth the big price tag.
The critical step is for the Corps of Engineers to do a feasibility study, to determine that more value would be gained than the money that's actually spent in constructing or building the navigation, constructing the locks and dams and that. And the original feasibility study, everyone believed that it would come out as a positive, and I think at the tail end it was slightly negative.
A second feasibility study produced similar results. And for now, the dream of a Wabash River open to commercial traffic remains somewhere out there in the future.
And when the need comes, and I think the need's getting close, I think we'll do something with it and to improve the quality of the water and the navigation and to help our environment.
Coal and grain are the two big barge movement things, and when you look at the 475 miles of the Wabash River, and it is relatively undeveloped, and is the largest river still undeveloped in the United States in length. Why then, the history is not closed on the matter.
I grew up 4 blocks from here. My mom and dad actually met out here in a John boat and got married. Been married for 35, 40 years. I just want to clarify that my parents were not married in the John boat, but there have been people up here married, on pontoon boats on the river. I've had a second cousin, and they come up here and got married, and they've been married 10 years now. So I think once you find love on the Wabash, it's true love. So I don't know. I sure love the river.
You can catch anything that swims, from hackleback to highfin, even this poor river rat's heart, my Wabash River queen.
As pleasing to the eye as the Wabash can be, sometimes what you see is enough to make you cry.
This is the worst thing you can imagine, guys. I mean, they are deliberately, they're not just being thoughtless. I mean, they're bringing that stuff out here to dump it on other people.
It's as if some people make a conscious decision to be part of the problem.
There's a lot of bones and hair from some animal that they butchered, and blankets, and then household trash.
On a bank of the Wabash River in Lafayette, a group of inspired individuals has been busy cleaning up someone else's mess.
We just finished cleaning up a small dump where somebody had backed their truck up to the riverbank and just unloaded their trash, as if they think the river is a dump.
It's absolutely unbelievable that somebody would trash the banks of the Wabash.
And we're kind of searching through the trash to see if we can figure out who did this, who dumped it there, so that we can send them a bill for this cleanup. Interesting.
This Wabash River cleanup was organized by the Hoosier Environmental Council.
We're a nonprofit group that is statewide, and we've been around for 25 years, and our focus is on education and advocacy to protect our environmental resources.
Ray Schnapp serves as the Hoosier Environmental Council's Wabash River Keeper.
In order to be a river keeper, you have to be accepted into the Waterkeeper Alliance. So we made a commitment to be a spokesperson for the river, and really we see that as building a voice for the river, because it's really much more than just one person. And we also had to make a commitment to monitor and patrol the river, which again we're doing with a lot of assistance from local groups. The third commitment is to be willing to litigate, so to sue polluters and enforce the law.
Did you find some stuff that you can use?
I did. We found some mail that and some prescriptions and a prescription card that I think could be useful in tracking down the person that did this. Some people would see us as radical. Personally, I think that what's radical is the idea that we could trash our environment and not face any consequences.
Oh, look at the beaver. Evidence of beaver. See where he's been eating? See where he's been sliding down?
Life on the Bright White River is not, of course, limited to human life.
We got raccoon, we got mink, we got coyote, we got a lot of bird life, you know, blue heron, the white egret, wild turkeys.
The Wabash has been here since the glacier melt back 10, 12,000 years ago, and it's always served as a north-south corridor for the birds from the Gulf of Mexico all the way up to the Great Lakes and into Canada, and some even up as far as Alaska.
At the Cane Ridge Wildlife Management Area along the Wabash in southwest Gibson County, migratory birds by the thousands find a safe place to stop and regain their strength before continuing their twice-a-year journey.
If you'll notice here on this sandbar here, if I can get my cameraman to get in here, here's a nice coyote track right here. And what he's doing, he's smelling these birds that's been on the bar. And you can see the bird tracks going down. Well, if he can catch up with that bird, that's going to be supper for him. So that just gives you an idea of what kind of wildlife we have down here on the Wabash.
This is the place I was telling you guys about. I think this is such a cool spot. This is something that you are not going to believe. We're standing here in Twin Swamps in Point Township in Posey County. It is unique because it is one of the few remaining cypress swamps here in the state of Indiana. As you're standing here in this swamp, I would have you think about if I had blindfolded you and brought you here, and then taken you out on this boardwalk and taken your blindfold off and said, what state are you in? I dare say the great majority of people from the state of Indiana would guess they were in Florida or Louisiana. It doesn't look like Indiana. In this part of the world, a lot of the phrases that we use to talk about our landscape are phrases that do perhaps come out of the South. We have bayous in the area, or bayous as they're sometimes known. We have sloughs, we have swamps. This I would call a slough. These sloughs are connected to the Wabash, if not all of the year, at least part of the year. When the river will come up, it will break over the banks and flow down the sloughs and will refill these ponds and swamps and maintain the water level in them throughout the year. And so while it's not directly a part of the Wabash today, the Wabash is not flowing through this swamp as it is. The Wabash does provide the water, which is the lifeblood of this swamp. It's a fantastic spot that's so unique in Indiana, and one that I just am so delighted to be living near.
The Wabash River looks as though it's a pretty gentle river as it flows by us. At times, however, it becomes an angry waterway.
Okay, I remember the flood of 1937. I was only 4 years old, and the Wabash River had come up and was gradually circling our house. And I can remember people getting in boats and going around the back of the house to get things out of our shed. I had two cousins that were talking about taking a wash tub and getting in it and floating, and they tried that, and of course that didn't work, so they turned over, and that's pretty clear in my mind.
I think perhaps the largest disaster to hit us would be the 1913 flood that followed a disastrous tornado in this area. People's homes were wrecked, people were killed and injured, and the recovery had to depend upon people that were less damaged by the flood. Of course, there were floods before and after the flood of 1913, but that probably was the most disastrous one that hit this area. But even today, people still watch the news reports when they start to say that the river is on the rise, and we breathe a sigh of relief when it begins to recede.
Here's what living near the Wabash lets me do. Most of the time I'm Richard Day, historian at the State Historic Sites, but sometimes I get to put on the makeup, put on the clothing, and I become an Indian leader, the most beloved Indian leader of all, Chief Tecumseh, the leader of the Shawnee. The reason I get to do this is because Vincennes is an historical area. It's on the Wabash River, and many historical events have happened along this river. The neighbors don't necessarily think I'm crazy. People here in Vincennes understand this. They're accustomed to seeing people at various times dressing up in period clothing, as we call it, because along the river we accept that as part of reenacting and getting in contact with our past.
Take a little of that.
All up and down the Wabash River, there are places where important things happened in the past. You can go to these places and step back in time and find out what life was like 200, 300 years ago.
So be it. Tecumseh, I have heard that you have some problems with our land purchase. Tell us your grievances.
Unless you give up the idea of buying the land from the different tribes, there can be no peace.
Here in Vincennes, we have the muster on the Wabash, where I get to be Tecumseh and confront Governor William Henry Harrison and ask him why he is taking our lands from us and try to get some sort of an explanation.
Now you came here under a council fire of peace, and you may go in peace. This council is over.
By the time this confrontation between Harrison and Tecumseh really took place in August of 1810, the massive, brutal disappearing act inflicted upon our Native Americans was already picking up steam.
I think say just right here in this region, you know, was American Indian people for thousands of years. You know, we had the Miami, we had the Kickapoo, had the Weas, the Potawatomis, the Plankashaw, the Ottawa, the Lennies, the Wyandot, the Shawnee, all come to this area.
And then they began to disappear. Some were marched at gunpoint to reservations 1,000 miles away. Others died or were put to death before their marches could be made. The Native American population on the Wabash dwindled away to almost nothing.
It was a Holocaust, if I've ever heard of one. It just happened to American Indian people in this area here and all across the U.S. It seems like America wants the world to forget what they did to us as people.
But the Wabash has a way of calling its people home. At the Sullivan County Fairgrounds, just 10 miles from the Wabash as the crow flies, our Native American people have returned to celebrate their heritage with a powwow.
There was a prophecy that was spoken one time, many generations ago, that said that at one time the state of Indiana will be the center point for Native American spirituality. Something's going to develop here in the state of Indiana. It's going to bring American Indians from all over to this area. And so we see it. We had many ceremonial places along the Wabash River, and we still go to them. Sometimes we keep them very private where we go. And we go up there and we just have songs and prayers and remembrance of the past, you know, and who our people was, you know. And so we still today try to go out and leave tobacco offerings into the water and to take food out to the spirits from time to time to honor them and respect them and do our best in what we have to do with today. You see those spirits on the water. You see our ancestors in boats. You see them because what was is still is today. Our Indian people in the spirit world still travel the same river. They camp out on the same island today. They still come here to harvest the food and the herbs and the hunts. So everything that was still coexists today.
Look, here are raccoon prints. Let's get down here and take a good look at them.
Harold Allison is a true believer in sharing his love of nature.
Now you know what a raccoon is. He has a little mask like a little bandit. He likes to get crayfish and different things, and he brings them down here, takes them out in the water, and he washes them off.
Harold also writes a weekly outdoors and nature column for the Washington Times-Herald, syndicated to newspapers all over southern Indiana. Although the Wabash is a 20-minute drive from Washington, Indiana, news of the Wabash often finds its way into the Times-Herald's editorial meetings, and the news isn't always good.
And what concerns me, the Gulf of Mexico is becoming, at the mouth of the Mississippi, a dead zone.
What does that mean?
There's 5,800 square miles of the Gulf of Mexico that is now becoming devoid of life. It's called the Gulf hypoxia. And sad to say, they have done a lot of research on this, and a lot of that is coming from the Wabash River.
Industrial contaminants like PCBs, heavy metals like mercury, and E. coli contamination from untreated sewage pose significant health concerns, although levels have dropped dramatically since the Clean Waters Act of the 1970s. Still, scientists do issue warnings about eating fish from the Wabash, caught at certain locations and at certain times of the year, and the Wabash is no stranger to the list of our nation's 50 most polluted rivers. Agricultural runoff from hundreds of thousands of acres of Ohio, Illinois, and Indiana farmland is one of the biggest worries. It is choking the Wabash with sediment, interrupting the reproduction of native river species. The runoff of agricultural fertilizers into the Wabash also overfeeds the river's algae. When the algae takes over, other life in the river can be robbed of oxygen. Visibility in the water is severely decreased.
That kind of restricts the types of fish that thrive in there. Visual predators don't hunt when they can't see very far. And so a lot of the game fish people enjoy, especially smallmouth bass, they don't thrive when the river's cloudy like that.
Okay, Turkey, let's go.
Bishop Mumford, better known as Bish, of Griffin, Indiana, raises turkeys for a hobby. He makes his living farming hundreds of acres of corn and wheat and soybeans. Although Bish's farmland is miles from the Wabash, he understands the effect his runoff can have on whether the river is healthy or not.
So much of what we're dealing with is concerning runoff from our farm. This plow is designed to do a lot of ripping without disturbing the surface, and so that's what we're going to do here. And so the whole idea is to maintain good growing conditions for the corn, yet at the same time keep the soil right here, which is right where I want it. I want my soil in my field and not in the ditch over there, and then not in the Wabash River.
Bish Mumford is one of a growing group of farmers who are having a positive environmental impact through the implementation of agricultural BMPs.
They're called best management practices. Things like putting grassy filter strips along streams, not farming right up to the edges of streams. Our legislature can play a really good role in this if they choose to. That things like the Farm Bill on a national level really influence how farming is practiced across the country and what incentives are given to farmers to implement BMPs that then influence water quality.
Well, here we are in Logansport, and this is the Little Turtle Waterway.
Perhaps the most encouraging development in the quest for a cleaner, healthier Wabash is the recent emergence of new riverfront green space with its public parks and walkways and trails.
This was built by a group of volunteers. Our idea was to get people in the river and on it and then next to it, and we thought that the best way to do that would be to build this project.
Over the years, a number of Indiana cities and towns have turned their backs on the Wabash. It was easier to look away than to face real issues of neglect.
All the cities along the Wabash, unfortunately, used and thought of the Wabash as a dumping place. But everything's turning around now. People are turning more toward recreation, and this is one of our spots.
Inspiration for the Little Turtle Waterway in Logansport, new riverfronts in Bluffton and in Lafayette, and new river trails outside New Harmony can all be traced back to one historic park along the river.
You know, as we go into the 21st century, here we are talking about river walks and fronts for our rivers and development, and we've had one here in Vincennes for 100 years, and it's been Kimmel Park. It's just a beautiful riverfront for a beautiful river.
Taking their cues from Kimmel Park, communities from one end of the Wabash to the other are finding ways to make the investment that will open up the river and return it to its rightful place, center stage, in the hearts and minds of its people.
Anytime you want to get out and just take your blood pressure down 10 or 20 notches, this is the place to do it.
Here we are in Bluffton, Indiana. It's a wonderful fall day, and we're very proud to show off what we have here along the river. We did most of this for an economic development, if you can believe that. And the idea was, what can we do to make people want to be in Bluffton and to be proud of Bluffton?
More and more people are developing personal relationships with the river. And once you get to know the Wabash and begin to enjoy her company, you are much less likely to do her harm.
We know that as the trails develop and more people come down and use them and see the Wabash and what's happening, there's going to be less and less tolerance of people dumping along the Wabash, anybody polluting the Wabash in any way, just because there's more recognition of what's going on down here.
If a person comes down here and they love the river and they see something happening that they don't like, then they feel that they have some ownership and that they're going to do something about it.
If I could one day offer up a prayer for the Wabash River, the prayer would be that Tinkashala Wakantaka, the Creator, have pity on us and to bless these waterways and to bring a new awareness to the people.
Shall we gather at the river? From the beginning, we always have, and we probably always will. And if, in our hands, the Wabash has been compromised, if its character has been called into question by our misbehavior, we may find redemption in this one simple fact. The Wabash will forgive us. It will allow us another chance. A change in our ways for the better will be met by the Wabash with new beauty and balance. Purity and clarity will return, so that someday soon, from New Corydon to New Harmony, we may all recognize the good to be gained by joining in to celebrate life on the once, and perhaps once again, bright, white river. I'm Philip Gully.
Here's an old Johnny Cash song. Fish ain't biting, and I don't really care. I'm in no hurry. Like the Wabash River there, I'd be drinking, laying dead somewhere. If it wasn't for the Wabash River, if it wasn't for the Wabash River, and this willow tree and my pole in a line, I'd be going crazy as the Indiana cyclone, drowning memories of her and crying, crying, crying. If it wasn't for the Wabash River, I'd be going out of my mind.
The Wabash, Life on the Bright White River, is produced in cooperation with the Wabash River Heritage Corridor Commission and made possible with the support of the Wabash Valley Association for orderly development in a balanced environment. Additional program funding provided by
the Nature Conservancy, who, with its members and conservation partners, has protected over 56,000 acres of irreplaceable forest, wetland, and prairie habitats throughout Indiana. Visit us on the web at nature.org.
Hoosier Energy, a generation and transmission cooperative based in Bloomington, providing electric power and services to Central and Southern Indiana distribution cooperatives.
The Hoosier Environmental Council's Wabash Riverkeeper, protecting Indiana's rivers for you. To help, call 317-685-8800.
The Rivers Institute at Hanover College, enhancing the understanding of the culture, economics, and science of river systems throughout the world. More at riversinstitute.org.